The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient Gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch. And we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star lamps that they would use?
I'll just jump in. This is a very good question. Wes Huff is so hot right now.
Okay.
He's everywhere. I've never heard of him. I think maybe. I mean, his face is kind of familiar, but after
he looks like a guy,
he's got one of those faces.
Yeah.
He is everywhere right now. Everybody loves him.
All of a sudden.
And for good reason. I mean, he deserves it.
So have you watched this interview?
No, I have not watched any of it.
Okay, so I'll break down.
I have only heard the commentary about the interview.
Yes, so let me break down what happened. So there is this, conspiracy theorist, a lot of people allegedly a con artist. A lot of people think he's a con artist. He's making millions of dollars off of his brand called Forbidden Knowledge. And his name is Billy Carson. And so he had a buddy from that kind of realm, but his buddy happened to be Christian. And it's so funny because when we were talking about this, the co-host or the host of this podcast where this debate happened between Billy Carson and, who we'll see here in a second, Wes Huff, who is a biblical historian and a historian in general.
Dude knows his stuff.
Knows his stuff. Going for his doctorate degree, has, went and worked with manuscript fragments from...
I think his job right now is, he said like Apologetics Canada. I don't know, some kind of organization, but he is like the leader of an apologetics organization in Canada.
And so Billy Carson was going around on podcasts. He went on Joe Rogan's podcast. He went on Andrew Schultz. He went on who's that one guy with it's like PD something, political commentator guy. Has a company called People Helping People. Forget his name. But he kept saying, well, according to the Sinai Bible, and you can see all these clips, according to the Sinai Bible, according to the Sinai Bible.
I saw What Do You Mean? I mean, that was the Sinai Bible.
And he kept saying that the Sinai Bible says that doesn't have Jesus being crucified.
Right.
And so we're not going to watch this part, but you can find it. It is covered a lot. Wes Huff puts it on himself, and we'll have a link to the full video of this. But essentially, Billy Carson tries to say the same thing. So
he runs the same line.
And Wes goes, so what do you mean by the Sinai Bible? Well, he's like, I have a photocopy of what you're referring to.
Yeah, he's like, do you mean Sinaiticus?
Yes.
And Billy Carson's like,
yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean, Sinaiticus. And he's like, well, I just happen to have Sinaiticus right here.
Yes. And he can read Hebrew and Greek, and pulls open the part of the Sinaiticus of the different gospel accounts. It says right here, look, it says right here. And then he goes, oh, well, I meant the Gospel of Barnabas. And he's like, well, I'm glad you brought that up. The Gospel of Barnabas. That's actually a known forgery. And because there's parts in the Gospel of Barnabas that you can tell it took 14th century ideas and was inserted in. So even the author of the Gospel of Barnabas or the Book of Barnabas or whatever didn't even have familiarity of first century geography. And so there's a part where he says he went from this location to this location in an hour, and it's like it's a whole day's trip.
Not even
and then
possible.
he paraphrases Dante's Inferno within this. So he's like, and then he goes, okay, well, the Gospel of Jesus' wife. Well, so this was a 1st century fragment.
Oh, this one's the richest one.
Or like a 2nd century fragment of papyrus.
Yeah.
That is at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
And basically some biblical historian lady brought it, was like, this is crazy. And everybody's like, oh, this is going to defeat the Bible or whatever. And this one is really wild.
This is the best one.
And because they tested it, it's actual like papyrus from, a little bit after Jesus lived. And you're like, okay, this is something serious.
Like the physical papyrus itself dated to that time.
And the transcription on it claimed to be from Jesus's wife. And what's hilarious about this is that they proved it was a forgery because there is a version of what was written on it that was only found, there's an error in it that was only found in a PDF version of the document they copied it from. So they copied an error that was only copied into this PDF version that is on like the National Library or something like that. And so they proved that it was a forgery
The text on that
there was an
papyrus
error
forgery.
that was specific to that PDF document. Anyway, so
God's sovereignty
Yeah.
and sense of humor and his sovereignty, it just doesn't get any
it's
better.
amazing.
It does not get any better than that.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
And so
So
basically
Wes Huff is like pow 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 pow.
yeah,
pow.
yeah. So
Just
that's like
blowing holes in this
the
guy.
quick of what happened early on in this podcast. In this part, Wes is talking about, hey, you're telling me these accounts of this ancient civilization and this ancient civilization, but you need to have your methodology for how you come up with this. So let's just jump into that. I want to take a different approach than most people have with this because I agree with that.
Most people are just talking about how he got absolutely schooled
Yeah.
and his whole life is over.
I think I've found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like
Ice
the
cold,
Sinai
yes.
Bible, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those 3 topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. And it's less than 0.1%. You talked about eyewitness accounts convinced you that Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet. And their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have...
Based on, what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa. They experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America.
Star Brothers.
I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey and Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for, to hide from Romans, is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. Then you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone to walkabouts
Do you mind?
in the outback,
Yeah.
and the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed down history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side, because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh, man. Well, first and foremost, some of these texts some of these cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient Gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star lines that they would use?
I'll just jump in just to say this is a very good question. If there's one thing to give him credit, if there's one thing that Billy Carson is standing on, it is this question. And throughout all my younger years, going to a rather traditional, not super spiritual church, I will say my parents were very open to these kinds of answers, spiritual answers. But I was not taught any of this. And I think that this really is, in our coming time, one of the best questions, which basically is, sure, the Bible has truth, but how do you explain all of these experiences, like psychedelics, like we discussed earlier, all of these other experiences outside of the Bible that that happen? They do happen to people. So what are they? They're outside of the Bible. They're real experiences. They do happen. They are spiritual. What are they?
Yeah.
And I think that probably is one of the best questions and one of the most pressing questions that Christians will need to be prepared to answer.
Yeah. I think the problem is, though, that, a lot of what people had a problem with Billy Carson was that he was taking all of this. He's like, I've traveled around to this tribe, and they've had this experience, and they've had this experience, and I was abducted by aliens myself, and, all of these things happened.
Okay.
And that's proof for why Christianity isn't real, and Christianity is the problem, and we need to get rid of Christianity because we need to realize that we're God consciousness, we're becoming God. It's kind of what we talked about before. The problem with all of that, in my opinion, is not only that, like what Wes is saying, is like, hey, you need a methodology for how you determine the validity of these verbal traditions or things like that, because there's definitely traditions or information that is false. We know this, like, I don't want to call out any specific religion, but, they show up to your door in white shirts with ties, and it seems a lot like Christianity, but,
the historicity just is not there.
It's not there.
It's simply not there.
And so what I think, though, that's funny is none of that disqualifies the Christian worldview.
Well, okay, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I also want to say the historicity is not sure. What is the historicity behind I need to turn that off. What is the historicity behind the Book of Mormon? What is the historicity behind the Quran? What is the historicity behind any of these oral teachings? Like all of that, the truth, the fact, historical truth, definitely on the table, definitely worth questioning, definitely worth questioning the Bible. I think it comes out smelling like a rose,
Yeah.
but it's worth questioning the historical accuracy of all that. What I'm saying is not even that. The question that Billy is asking is not historical fact, but experiential, subjective fact.
Yeah.
This thing happened to them. They had this knowledge that they should not have had. How do you explain that? Where the only explanation is something spiritual happened. And so I think
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the words for it. But basically, you go from materialism, jump to spiritualism.
Right.
And you go, oh, here's all these spiritual experiences. But just because you made the jump from materialism, historicity, facts, logic, reason to spiritualism and experience and subjective experience does not mean that you get to break all the categories of a Christian worldview. You need a Christian worldview to put all the Christian or to put all the subjective experiences in, not just a Christian worldview for all the facts and the reason and the logic and the historicism.
Well, there's obviously a big problem with Billy's historicity. He has a lot of things wrong. Obviously, you go through all those documents. He got all of those wrong. He's listening to forgeries. He's just taking whatever he can grab and piecing it all together in this weird collage and calling it, forbidden knowledge or something like that.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a problem with him just being inaccurate. But the thing of these ancient civilizations having knowledge and then these accounts of these beings coming to them seems a whole lot like the Bible.
Right.
Rather than not like the Bible.
Right.
We have accounts of the sons of God coming and, creating new types of beings with humans.
Right.
The Nephilim account. We've talked about this a lot. There is this dynamic, this clear dynamic of that there are these beings in the heavens, in the skies, that are trying to interact and subvert the plans of God. And I could definitely see them, like these pieces of these things actually happening, and then those same beings that are evil planting these ideas that are lies. It's like, it's so easy. You know, you see it in the beginning of Genesis with the serpent who says, did God really say that?
Right.
Where it's like, it kind of is true, but it's the wrong perspective. It's like how you can still tell the truth but manipulate.
Right.
You know?
I think, though, we are about to see, we have already seen, like, it's already too late for the church. Like, we need to wake up and get with the program. But I think it is well past time that we need to change the conversation towards waking up to a spiritualized worldview, because people are coming with these questions that are totally valid questions. These real spiritual experiences are happening, have happened in the past, are happening to me. Where does that fit within the Christian framework? Do these spiritual experiences that other cultures have had, that I have had, that my friends have had, do they fit within a Christian framework, or do they break and contradict a Christian framework? And it is high time Christians acknowledge that the one true God, the Most High God, as the Bible calls him, the Most High God, Yahweh, Jesus, who is part of that 3-in-1 Trinity, is not the only spiritual being out there.
Right.
Like we have to start grappling with it.
Yeah, and I think so. There was a commenter on Wes's YouTube channel that said, I was a follower of Billy Carson for I think it was 5 years, and I went down this forbidden knowledge thing, and I was convinced, and I would defend everything and go there. And he's like, I watched this interview and then gave my life to the Lord.
God bless him.
And got broken free from this trance, and now I believe I'm on the right path because of Wes just bringing solid, factual, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. This is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth.
Bro, that is why Wes deserves all the praise he is getting right now. Because, gosh, and he did it with such grace, with such humility, with such gentleness. Oh.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about Christianity, is that it not only fits this very specific historicity and accuracy, where you can where evidence and documents and all of these things are verifiable within history to certain degrees of certainty, but you also have your personal subjective experience of the Holy Spirit being active today, of being able to pray and see things actually come to pass, of being able to see people really get healed, and see this real subjective experience happen. Yeah. So that's what's so cool, and what satisfies that desire for these spiritual experiences is you can have that and be obedient to Christ. He actually wants to satisfy that desire of something bigger than yourself, to be a part of something bigger than yourself. But he satisfies the desire of the intellectual or the historian, like Wes. But he also satisfies the desire of the artist or the, fill in the blank. Yeah.
I think, we talked about last week about the new atheism dying and how the entire cultural conversation has changed and moved past it. So I think that there was a time,
and is moving towards spiritism,
and that's what I'm. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is the conversation around the new atheism? New atheism is dying. It's gone. The conversation has changed, and so the preparation, the kind of all the fortifications that Christians have built against the new atheism, they weren't worthless. They weren't useless. All the apologetics, all the presuppositional, philosophy and things like that, they weren't worthless. They were great. They were good. But we need to now, the what do you call it? The front, the line of attack has changed. The battle lines have moved and changed and shifted, and now the attack is not on the intellect and the historicity and the apologetics. The new apologetic is power.
Yeah.
In a funny way, the new apologetic is spiritual power. And for all Christians listening, please, I beg of you, this ain't no joke. Like, you have to have your own experience of personal spiritual power. You must. That is the new apologetic. All that
like
time
a personal,
spent,
like you become a new person in Christ.
I don't just mean that. I mean truly, like I'm talking visions and
so you're
dreams.
going straight Pentecostal right now.
Yes, I'm going full on, like, visions, dreams, hearing from God, words of knowledge, prophecies,
but you
tongues.
don't need all of those.
No.
Like,
yeah, that's correct.
Like, a lot of times individual people have different things. Like, some people will be able to discern the motives of people.
Right.
Well, or some people will actually dream dreams and the Lord speaks to them that way.
Right. Yeah, you don't need all of them, and you don't even need any specific one, but you do need, the new apologetic is spiritual power. And if you don't have any experience of spiritual power, you really, maybe it's wrong to put it this strongly, but I will anyway.
You do that.
You're right. That's my whole shtick. You need it.
Yeah.
You will have nothing to say to young people, to a new culture, without a real experience of spiritual power.
And like, when you're talking about evangelism, like, you and I both have experienced, like, sometimes it's just happening and you meet that person and it's the right place at the right time. And then all of a sudden you just have the words to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of my most faithful, disciples or someone that I helped lead to the Lord, it was that. It's like, I knew exactly what was happening in his life. I knew exactly what to say at exactly the right time. And his life changed. The trajectory of his life changed.